The Zorthian Empire was the most powerful force in the galaxy. With hundreds of worlds under its control, the Zorthians had long been the rulers of countless species, always on the edge of conquest. Their technology, strength, and intelligence made them unmatched, feared by all who crossed their path. But despite all their power, there was one thing that the Zorthian king, Varkur, could not control: humans, a small and relatively young species from Earth, had caught the attention of the Zorthian Empire. They had proven themselves resourceful, strong, and remarkably resilient in the face of adversity. Though the Zorthians had conquered many worlds, they found themselves intrigued by the humans' ability to adapt and survive. They had seen humans fight back against threats, rebuild cities after disasters, and even develop technologies that rivaled Zorthian inventions. In short, the humans had become a species the Zorthians could not ignore. King Verkor, a ruler known for his cunning and ambition, saw an opportunity in humanity. He knew that uniting with Earth through an alliance would make the Zorthian Empire even stronger. But the king had one condition for such an alliance. He wanted his daughters, the 4 princesses of Zorthia, to marry human men. This was not simply a matter of personal choice. It was a royal decree. A strategic alliance could only be solidified through the bond of marriage, and the king believed that such a move would bring immense benefits to his empire. The princesses were not happy about this order. As daughters of the most powerful ruler in the galaxy, they had always lived under the shadow of their father's will. The king's decree was not just a royal command. It was an order they could not refuse. The eldest princess, Alessa, had always been a master tactician. Her mind was sharp, and she had spent years studying the art of war, politics, and strategy. Alessa understood the importance of alliances, but she also believed that the future of the Zorthian Empire could not be shaped by a single decree. She knew the humans were strong, but was this marriage truly in the best interest of the Empire? Would the Zorthians allow themselves to be ruled by a human? It was a question she had not yet answered. Lyra, the second princess, was a brilliant scientist and inventor. Unlike her sisters, she was more focused on the future of Zorthian technology than on the politics of royal marriages. She had always dreamed of discovering new worlds, advancing the Empire's knowledge, and pushing the boundaries of what Zorthian science could achieve. But marrying a human? That was a matter that she didn't fully understand. She had met humans before. Some of them were remarkable in their ability to innovate, but would they truly be able to contribute to Zorthian advancement? Lyra had doubts, but she was also curious. If nothing else, marrying a human could open new doors of scientific collaboration. Virene, the third princess, was a fierce warrior. She had spent most of her life training in the art of combat, honing her skills with every weapon the Zorthian army had at its disposal. Virene believed that strength was the only language the universe understood. The king's decree made sense to her in a way. After all, the humans were strong, and if they were to be married into the royal family, their strength could be used to benefit the empire. But Virene also felt that her father's order was beneath her. She was a warrior, not a pawn in a political game. Marrying a human was not her idea of power. The youngest princess, Nissa, was the most diplomatic of them all. She had spent years studying the art of negotiation and leadership, working with alien species and resolving conflicts through dialogue. Nissa believed that diplomacy was the key to a peaceful galaxy. She had always hoped to use her position to bring peace to the universe, not to be forced into a marriage. The idea of marrying a human felt wrong to her. She had met a few humans who were interesting and clever, but could they truly understand the complexities of galactic diplomacy? Nissa feared that this forced marriage would lead to more conflict, not less. King Verkor, however, was not interested in their opinions. As the ruler of the Zorthian Empire, his word was law. The royal daughters could argue all they wanted, but they had no choice. They were to marry human men, and that was final. The king's decree came on the heels of a grand announcement. A tournament would be held to select the human candidates who would compete for the hands of the princesses. The king called this event the Great Union, and it was to be held on the capital planet of Zorthia. The tournament would test the strength, intelligence, and resilience of the human contestants. Only the best, the strongest, and the most capable would be worthy of marrying a princess. As the news spread throughout the galaxy, humans from Earth eagerly prepared for the tournament. Thousands of men and women volunteered to participate, eager to prove themselves worthy of the royal marriage. The Zorthians, in turn, watched with a mix of excitement and skepticism. Would the humans truly be able to stand up to the might of the Zorthian Empire? Could they win the favor of the princesses, who had never known anything but power and control? The princesses, each in their own way, prepared for what was to come. Alessa, ever the strategist, began to study the human competitors. She knew that the tournament would be fierce, and she wanted to make sure that her chosen contestant had the right skills. Lyra, too, began to study the human scientists and inventors who had volunteered for the tournament. She wondered if any of them had the potential to push Zorthian technology forward. Vereen, true to her warrior spirit, focused on the physical trials, selecting a human soldier who had been trained in combat. And Nisa, always the diplomat, started to look for a human who could be an ally in her mission for peace. As the days passed, the princesses began to realize something unsettling. The human contestants were not like the other species the Zorthians had conquered. They were determined, brave, and unyielding. Even more troubling was the way the humans began to view the princesses, not as royal figures to be conquered, but as equals with their own thoughts, desires, and goals. The king's decree had set a dangerous game in motion, one that neither the Zorthians nor the humans fully understood. It was not just a game of marriage. It was a battle for respect, for freedom, and for the future of two species. As the princesses prepared to meet their future husbands, they couldn't shake the feeling that their lives were about to change forever. Would they follow their father's orders? Or would they defy the royal decree and carve their own destinies? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain: the tournament would be more than just a competition. It would be the beginning of something much bigger. The day had finally arrived. The grand tournament was set to begin on the planet Zorthia, the heart of the Zorthian Empire. It was the most anticipated event in the galaxy, an event that would decide which human would marry one of the 4 royal princesses. Thousands of humans from Earth had signed up to compete, each hoping to prove themselves worthy of such an honor. For the Zorthians, this tournament was a spectacle, but for the princesses it was something else entirely. Princess Alessa stood in the royal observation tower, her sharp eyes scanning the battlefield below. Her mind, always calculating, was already devising strategies in case things didn't go according to plan. The tournament would be intense. It was a test of strength, intelligence, and endurance. But more than that, it was a test of character. She had chosen her champion carefully, a human who had shown brilliant tactical skills in the past. But Alessa had learned not to trust anyone too easily. She would be watching closely, assessing his every move. The human she had selected was Maxim. He wasn't the tallest or the strongest, but Alessa had seen something in him that the others lacked: strategic thinking. He had been a military officer on Earth, known for his ability to lead soldiers through difficult situations. He was a born leader, someone who could read the battlefield and make quick decisions. But Alessa knew that his true test would not be just about tactics. The king had demanded more than just skill. He wanted a marriage to cement an alliance, and Alessa wondered if Maxim would ever be able to live up to the Zorthian expectation of strength. Princess Lyra was in a different part of the palace, standing in a lab filled with advanced Zorthian technology. She was surrounded by scientists, engineers, and inventors who were working tirelessly to perfect the systems that would be used during the tournament. Unlike her sisters, Lyra was not focused on the physical aspect of the competition. She wanted to see if the human contestants could bring something new to the table, something innovative, something that could push Zorthian technology forward. Her chosen human was Lucas, a young engineer who had designed some of the most advanced machines on Earth. His reputation had spread quickly after he had created a series of groundbreaking inventions that used renewable energy sources. Lyra had been impressed by his intelligence and creativity. She had watched videos of his inventions, and she was convinced that Lucas had the potential to change the way the Zorthians viewed technology. But Lyra also knew that the tournament would be more than just about innovation. It would be a test of whether Lucas could survive in a world far more advanced than anything he had known on Earth. Could he truly adapt to Zorthian technology? Princess Vereen had no interest in machines or strategies. She was a warrior at heart, and the tournament was her domain. She stood tall in the royal barracks, her hands gripping the hilt of her sword as she watched the human warriors train. It wasn't about intelligence or creativity for her. It was about strength, She had chosen Jack, a soldier from Earth who had earned a reputation for his fierce combat skills. He was strong, fast, and fearless, everything a warrior should be. But Vereen knew that the Zorthians would not be easy to defeat, even with the best human warrior on their side. Vereen's mind raced as she thought about the challenges ahead. The tournament would include many brutal tests, including hand-to-hand combat, weaponry trials, and survival challenges. Vereen believed that strength alone would win the day. If Jack could survive the physical trials and prove himself to be the strongest, then the marriage would be his reward. But if he failed, then he would be sent back to Earth, just like so many others who would never be good enough. Princess Nissa was the youngest of the four, and she was also the most diplomatic. She had always been more concerned with peace than with battle. The tournament to her was not about competition. It was about the future of the galaxy. Nissa had spent years studying diplomacy, and she had seen firsthand how fragile peace could be. She knew that any alliance between Earth and Zorthia had to be carefully managed, and for that, she needed a human who could understand the complexities of leadership and negotiation. Nissa had chosen Ethan, a young politician from Earth who had been known for his ability to bring people together. He was not the strongest or the smartest, but Nissa had seen something in him that none of her sisters had. Ethan had an innate sense of fairness, and he had an ability to see things from multiple perspectives. Nissa believed that if he could understand the delicate balance of power between their worlds, he could help create lasting peace. The tournament began in the grand arena, and the competition was fierce from the start. The human contestants, though vastly outmatched by the Zorthians in terms of technology and experience, did not give up easily. They were determined to prove themselves, to show the Zorthian Empire that they were more than just a weak species from a distant planet. The first challenge was a test of strength. Humans and Zorthians alike had to lift massive weights, pull enormous ropes, and demonstrate their physical power. Maxime, Alessa's chosen warrior, excelled in the task, using his agility and quick thinking to outmaneuver his competitors. Lyra's champion Lucas struggled at first, but his ability to think through the problem and adapt helped him make progress, showing Lyra that there was more to him than just his inventions. Jack, Vereen's choice, tore through the competition with raw power, easily lifting more than any other contestant. But it wasn't just about strength. As the tournament progressed, the challenges became more complex. In the second round, the competitors had to navigate an obstacle course that tested both their endurance and their ability to think on their feet. Maxime, ever the tactician, chose to take a longer route through the course, avoiding the more dangerous traps and using his mind to find the safest path. Lucas, despite his lack of physical strength, used his engineering knowledge to repair a broken part of the course, impressing Lyra. Jack, on the other hand, relied purely on his physical skills, overcoming the obstacles with speed and brute force. Each challenge brought the contestants closer to victory, but it also revealed something deeper. The princesses began to see the humans not as mere competitors, but as individuals with unique strengths. They had been chosen to participate in this tournament because of their abilities, but what they showed in the competition was something even more important: determination. Nissa watched Ethan during the diplomacy trials, where human contestants were tasked with mediating disputes between alien species. Ethan, though nervous at first, showed a natural talent for negotiation. He listened carefully, understood the emotions of the parties involved, and found a solution that was fair to everyone. Nissa was impressed. She had been worried that the humans might not understand the complexities of diplomacy, but Ethan was proving her wrong. As the days passed, the princesses found themselves more and more fascinated by their human champions. They had expected to see weakness, but what they saw instead was resilience. The humans were not simply fighting for a prize. They were fighting for their survival, for their place in the galaxy. The tournament was far from over, but it had already begun to change the way the princesses thought about the humans. They had been told by their father that this was just a game, a way to secure a political alliance. But now, the princesses were beginning to question whether it was really just about power. Could it be about something more? Could it be about respect? As the final challenges approached, the tension between the princesses and their human champions grew. The tournament was becoming more than just a way to secure a marriage. It was becoming a battle for the future of two species. and the princesses were beginning to wonder where their loyalty truly lay. The tournament was now in its final stages, and the excitement on Zorthia was reaching a fever pitch. The human competitors, though still outmatched in many ways, had impressed everyone with their strength, intelligence, and, most importantly, their will to fight. Each of them had proven something, whether it was Maxim's strategic brilliance, Lucas's scientific creativity, Jack's raw physical power, or Ethan's ability to negotiate peace. The princesses had watched with growing admiration, and though they each tried to ignore it, a new feeling was growing inside them, something they had never expected. Alessa stood in the royal observation tower once again, watching as the final challenge began. Her mind, always calculating, was focused on the tournament, but a small part of her thoughts lingered on Maxim, her chosen human. She had expected him to be just a tool, a player in her strategy to strengthen the Zorthian Empire, but Maxim had changed her perspective. He wasn't just some soldier. He had a mind that rivaled even the best Zorthian tacticians. The way he had outsmarted the competition, thinking several steps ahead, had shown her that he could be more than just a marriage prize. Alessa could feel the growing tension in the air. She knew the human champions were not just fighting for a title. They were fighting for something bigger. They were fighting for their freedom, for the right to be seen as equals in a galaxy where they had always been looked down upon. She had seen that fire in Maxim's eyes, and she realized something that troubled her. She was starting to respect him, and not just as a competitor. Lyra, too, was watching the final trials from a different perspective. She had never been interested in the idea of marriage as a political tool, but the tournament had forced her to confront her own feelings. Her chosen human, Lucas, had been impressive in the way he had adapted to Zorthian technology. The way he had solved problems with innovative solutions showed Lyra that humans were capable of more than she had ever believed. But it was not just his intelligence that impressed her. It was his determination to never give up. Lyra had always been driven by the desire to create and discover new things, but Lucas was showing her that the power of will and heart could be just as important. She watched him now, focused intently on the final round of the tournament. He was far from the strongest or the most skilled, but he was never one to back down. He had a quiet determination, and Lyra found herself rooting for him. Her heart felt conflicted. Was she only rooting for him because he was the best contestant, or was it something deeper? She didn't know, but she couldn't ignore the stirrings of something unfamiliar. Could she really marry a human for the sake of politics, when she was beginning to feel such a connection to him? Virene, the fiercest of the princesses, was not one to feel conflicted. She had always believed in strength above all else, and the tournament had only reinforced that belief. Her champion Jack had been a true warrior, strong, fast, and fearless. He had crushed every challenge with ease, his sheer power overwhelming the competition. Virene had always thought that the strongest should rule, and Jack seemed to be everything she had wanted. Yet as the tournament went on, she started to see something that made her pause. It wasn't just about power. Virene had seen the other human competitors, Maxim, Lucas, and Ethan, each showing courage, resilience, and intelligence in ways that surprised her. And it made her wonder if strength alone was enough. She had been raised to believe that power ruled, but now she was seeing that perhaps there was more to being a ruler than just winning battles. She glanced at Jack now, standing strong and confident, but there was something missing. It was not enough to be strong. There had to be something more. Nissa, the youngest and most diplomatic of the princesses, had felt conflicted from the very beginning. The tournament was never something she had wanted, and she had no interest in marriage as a political tool. Her chosen human, Ethan, had proven to be a natural diplomat, using his skills to mediate conflicts and find solutions. Nissa had been impressed by his ability to understand the nuances of negotiation. She had expected him to be just another pawn in the game of politics, but Ethan had shown her something else. He had shown her that peace was not always about making deals or signing treaties. Sometimes it was about understanding and connection. Nissa had always been the one to think with her head, but now she found herself wondering if perhaps she had been too focused on the politics of peace. Could Ethan be more than just a political ally? Could he be someone she could truly respect and even care for? The thought was unsettling. But as she watched him in the final challenge, standing tall and steady, she couldn't deny the attraction she felt. Was it just admiration or something deeper? The final round of the tournament was unlike any that had come before. It was a test of survival, a dangerous obstacle course that would push the contestants to their limits. The Zorthians had designed it to test not just strength and skill, but endurance and mental toughness. The human champions would have to face their deepest fears, survive impossible odds, and rely on everything they had learned during the tournament. Maxim, Lucas, Jack, and Ethan each faced the course with determination. Alessa watched closely as Maxim approached the first obstacle, an enormous wall of rock that seemed impossible to climb. But Maxim didn't hesitate. He studied the wall for a moment, then began his climb, using his tactical mind to find the best route. He moved quickly, gracefully, and with purpose. Alessa's heart skipped a beat. This was no ordinary human. Lyra watched Lucas as he approached the same obstacle. He wasn't as physically strong as the others, but his mind worked quickly. He noticed a series of ropes and pulleys that the other contestants had missed. With a quick adjustment, he was able to climb the wall, using his knowledge of mechanics to his advantage. Lyra's eyes widened in admiration. She had not expected him to be this resourceful. She had underestimated him. Viren's eyes were fixed on Jack as he approached the obstacle. His strength was unmatched and he moved with ease, scaling the wall faster than anyone. Viren's chest swelled with pride. This was the warrior she had chosen. This was the strength that Zorthia needed. But as she watched him, she noticed something else, a hint of frustration in his eyes. He was strong, yes, but was that enough? Nissa was focused on Ethan, who approached the obstacle with a calm, measured pace. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He assessed the situation, then found his own path to the top. It was slow but steady. Nissa watched with growing respect. Ethan wasn't the fastest, but he was the most patient. He was the one who understood the bigger picture. Could he be the partner she needed, both in diplomacy and in life? As the final challenge came to an end, it was clear that the humans had impressed everyone. They had fought hard, each using their unique skills to overcome impossible odds. But the princesses could no longer ignore the truth. They were beginning to care about their human champions. The tournament had started as a simple political game, but it had become something much more. It had become a test of loyalty, of values, and of what it truly meant to be a ruler. The princesses had been forced to confront their own beliefs, their own emotions, and their own future. They had each chosen a human, but now they had to choose something else. What was more important? Duty to their father or their growing feelings for the humans they had once seen as mere pawns? The rebellion was not just in the hearts of the human champions, it was in the hearts of the princesses as well. And now, they would have to decide whether they would follow the path laid out for them by their father or break free from it and carve their own destinies. The final round of the tournament was over. The last challenges had tested the human contestants beyond their limits, pushing them through physical and mental trials that no one, even the Zorthians, had expected them to survive. But the humans had done it. Maxim, Lucas, Jack, and Ethan had all made it to the end, each showing incredible skill, determination, and resilience. They had fought hard, faced impossible odds, and earned the respect of the Zorthian Empire. But for the princesses, the end of the tournament was not the end of their journey. It was the beginning of something much more difficult, the moment when they would have to make a choice that would change everything. Alessa stood at the edge of the royal balcony, gazing down at the crowd in the arena. The cheers of the spectators echoed in her ears, but her mind was elsewhere. She had watched Maxim throughout the tournament, and as each trial had passed, her respect for him had grown. At first, she had seen him only as a pawn in her father's game, but now she saw him as a partner, someone who could help shape the future of Zorthia. He was not just a human. He was a leader, a tactician, someone who could stand by her side and make the right decisions for the Empire. Yet Alessa knew that her father would never accept this. King Vercor had made his decree clear. His daughters were to marry humans, but they were not to marry for love. They were to marry for power, to strengthen the Zorthian Empire. And Maxim, despite his brilliance, was still just a human. Alessa had always believed that loyalty to her father and to the Empire was everything. But now she wasn't so sure. The decision weighed heavily on her heart. If she chose Maxim, she would be defying her father. The consequences would be severe, not just for her, but for her entire family. She would risk everything, including the future of Zorthia itself. But if she followed her father's command, she would lose something far more important: her sense of self, her belief in what was right. Alessa took a deep breath. She knew what she had to do. In another part of the palace, Lyra was pacing back and forth, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. She had spent the entire tournament observing Lucas, and with each challenge her admiration for him had only deepened. He had proven that he was not only capable of thinking on his feet, but also of creating solutions that the Zorthians had never even considered. His mind was a tool that could help the Empire advance in ways she had never dreamed possible. But Lyra also knew that the tournament was about more than just science and invention. It was about power, and the Zorthians ruled through strength. Her father, King Vercor, would never allow her to marry someone who was not of royal blood, not of the same power. The human Lucas, despite his genius, was still just a human. Could she marry him for the sake of progress? Or would she be forced to marry someone chosen for her by the Empire? Lyra's thoughts drifted back to the tournament's final challenge. Lucas had amazed everyone with his resourcefulness, using his knowledge of engineering to solve complex problems that even the Zorthian scientists couldn't figure out. She knew that he could take Zorthian technology to new heights, but would the king allow such a partnership? Could she risk everything for a future that might not even be possible? Lyra stopped pacing and stared out of the window. The decision was in her hands, but it was a decision that could change the course of the future. She had always believed in science and progress, but now she realized that there was something even more important. Freedom. Lucas represented that freedom, the freedom to choose, to think for oneself, to create something new. Could she take that chance? Could she choose him, knowing the consequences? Vereen, the fierce warrior, was in the royal barracks watching as her chosen champion, Jack, prepared for the final contest. He had proven himself again and again in the tournament, defeating every opponent with strength and precision. He was everything Vereen had ever wanted in a warrior, strong, confident, fearless. But now, as the final challenge loomed, she found herself questioning what really mattered. Vereen had always believed in the power of strength. She had been raised to think that the strongest should rule, that the fiercest should lead. Jack embodied that ideal perfectly. He was a warrior in every sense of the word. But as Vereen watched him now, preparing for the last trial, she wondered if strength alone was enough. Was it enough to defeat the other champions, but not enough to win her heart? She had been raised to follow her father's orders without question, but now for the first time she wasn't sure. Jack had shown bravery and determination, but did he have the qualities that made a true leader? Did he have the compassion, the intelligence, the heart that Zorthia needed? Could she really marry him for the sake of politics, knowing that there might be someone better, someone who could help her shape a future that was stronger than any single warrior's power? Vereen sighed deeply. She knew that if she married Jack, it would be a choice made out of tradition, out of duty. But could she do it? Could she choose duty over her own heart? Finally, Nisa the diplomat stood in her private chambers, staring at the hologram of Ethan. The young politician had impressed her during the tournament, not with physical strength or intelligence, but with his ability to connect with people, to understand their fears and hopes. Ethan had shown Nisa that peace was not something that could be bought with power, but something that had to be earned through understanding. Nisa had chosen him for his skill in diplomacy, but now she realized that there was more to him than she had first thought. He was not just a good negotiator, he was a man of integrity, of honor. Nisa had always been focused on the politics of peace, but Ethan had reminded her that true peace came from the heart, not just the mind. The problem was that Nisa knew the king would never approve of her choice. Her father had already made it clear that this marriage was not about love or partnership. It was about power. But Nisa didn't care about power. She cared about the future, about creating a world where peace could thrive. She had always dreamed of being a ruler who would bring the galaxy together, but she couldn't do it alone. Ethan had shown her that he could be her partner in that vision. But was she ready to defy her father? Could she risk everything she had ever known for a chance at something better? The question was terrifying, but Nisa knew that the time had come to make her choice. The day of the royal gathering arrived. The 4 princesses stood together on the grand balcony, watching as the human champions were brought forward. The arena below was filled with thousands of spectators, all eagerly awaiting the announcement of the chosen human who would marry each of the princesses. Alessa stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She had made her decision. She would not follow her father's orders. She would choose Maxim, The man who had proven that strategy, intelligence, and heart were more important than power. She would risk everything for a future where they could rule together, not as master and servant, but as equals. Lyra followed, her mind made up. She could not marry someone who only sought power. She would choose Lucas, the man who had shown her the true meaning of progress. Someone who would help Zorthia rise, but not through force. They would build something new together. Vereen, too, stepped forward. She had always believed in strength, but now she knew that strength alone would not be enough. She chose Jack, not because he was the strongest, but because he had shown her the courage to change, to question the way things had always been. She would stand beside him not as a warrior, but as a partner. Nisa, the diplomat, chose Ethan. She had always sought peace, but now she knew that peace could only come through understanding and cooperation. She would stand with Ethan not as a ruler, but as an equal, forging a new path for both their worlds. The four princesses had made their choice. They would no longer live under the shadow of their father's decree. Together with their human champions, they would fight for a new future, one of respect, equality, and freedom. And so, the rebellion began. But it was not one of violence. It was a rebellion of the heart, a rebellion for the future of two worlds that would now be united, not by force, but by love, respect, and the shared desire for a better tomorrow.